Hello everyone and welcome to SodiusWillert's live OSLC Connect for Jira demo. I am Wolfgang Leimbach and my role is Business Development Executive at Willert Software Tools based in Germany. It is my pleasure to be your host and moderator during today's session. While I speak, you see an overview of our company. Most important is our mission, the power of connected data. And what we will show you today exactly fits into this mission. The webinar will be presented by my colleague, Robert Baillargeon, as he is the product owner at SodiusWillert for our OSLC Connect products. For us listeners, this will definitely be a great opportunity to experience this exciting solution. So, time to get serious now. Robert, over to you.
Thank you so much, Wolfgang. Appreciate everybody taking time, their afternoon and their morning, depending on where you're located. Like Wolfgang said, I'm Robert Baillargeon. I'm pleased to be able to spend some time with you today. Our mission here at SodiusWillert is pretty simple here. Our goal is to integrate the engineering enterprise to accelerate your ideas to market. Basically, we mean to help you be able to create better tools, be able to create better products. And so when we look at our set of solutions, we have basically three different pillars that you might know us from. On the far right-hand side, you see some of our solutions on the engineering tool side, notably our UML Embedded Studio and our RxF platform for Rhapsody, which helps in the certifiable domain for deeply embedded systems like we see in aerospace, defense, and automotive. In our middle tier, our history at the Sodius entity has often been on model transformation, working with UML tools and being able to exchange between those different UML tools. And that's really our publisher platform, as well as activities that we've done recently around migration from DOORS to DOORS Next. We have a rich history in DOORS, I think, with our DXL editor platform. We know most of the DOORS admins around the world. So we have a rich history there. What we're going to talk about today is on our OSLC Connect, which is what Wolfgang talked about really across this enterprise linked data, and allows us to be able to integrate tools like Jira and Windchill into the larger enterprise. And it's really exciting on how we can bring tools from different providers using a common standard to be able to have them work together. And that's really what we're going to talk about today. And what we value in our products is really helping engineers. Most everybody in our company is actually an engineer. That's what gets us excited about working with teams and being able to make sure that they have the tools they need to build the products that they want to. We want people to be able to use their tools of choice. We want them to work simply and effectively. And hopefully through this presentation, through this demo, you can get a good sense of what we're trying to do there. Our tools don't dictate a process. We know that each organization has their own standards, their own mission, their own workflows, and we want to be able to support those. So the idea is you can integrate these within your flow and how you use them best. And many of the people on our team come from large organizations. I worked in automotive for 15, 20 years. We know that the constraints are not just what the tools the engineers use, but also what tools IT teams can deploy and deploy well. So things that you're going to see with our OSLC products in terms of being IT friendly. So we're not copying data. We have user authentication that's always driven by the source tool. These are server-side deployments. They're not on the client side, so it helps reduce that burden of being able to do deployment management. And that's really what we want to make sure that we have, is that tools that are readily functional for engineers and easy to deploy by the IT teams. So what we want to do is streamline this engineering lifecycle. And so OSLC is a standard that came out roughly around 10 years ago, oftentimes driven by the IBM team as they've developed their JAS platform, but not focused solely on the IBM platform. it took a great vision in terms of what could be developed. The idea that we can preserve different repositories in these organizations. So think of this as a distributed systems of record. We don't want to have one repository. We know there's going to be many repositories. How can we connect these? How can we preserve the unique data models that each of the tools have, but have connectivity between them? That's the goal, that's the objective, and that's what this standard focuses on. That focuses on tool vendors and tool users getting together to say how these systems should operate together. Core to this is this support of linking, both between projects, across repositories, both in the notion of how do we describe these links, and then most importantly for us, the integration points. So how do we access artifacts in another repository? How do I select the ones I want to link to? How do I want to see those? And we think of those as the pickers, the selectors, and the preview. So how do I have access to that information? What's been coming up and very important for many of our customers recently is the ability to be able to do configuration management. So managing and dealing with different versions of assets and how these links affect that. And you'll see a little bit of this later on as we talk about configuration management in our Jira to DOORS Next integration. And we'll give you a sense of how do I make sure when I traverse a link, I get to the right version of that artifact that I want. So if I'm working in one version and working on a particular release, that I have the right requirement that I might be working with. And the whole goal of this is to be enterprise approved. So being able to make sure that we know who has access to data, when they have access to data, having this distributed and connected topologies, those are all important to us. We're using web standards, so we might have people that are using a cloud-based platform for Jira, they might be using a local-based platform for their ELM environment, some other environment for their DOORS environment. This format, this standard is flexible to that. Those are all kind of the standard type things. What we want to focus on is what makes users productive. And you'll see a sense of this as we walk through the demonstration. We want to be able to make sure users have things that make them productive. We want them to be able to navigate between these different repositories. You'll see this, how we can navigate just through our web browser between a Jira environment, an ETM environment, a DOORS Next environment, Polarion environment, indeed, and just navigate naturally. That should be how we should operate. That's what makes engineers more productive. They can see the data, they can navigate to the data. They're not loading multiple different tools. We want to have the ability to be able to pick the artifacts we want to link to, so see into those other repositories. And we want to have access to the artifacts, whether it's a rich preview that we can see artifacts from, say, Jira when I'm sitting within my DOORS Next environment, or whether or not it's reporting where I can actually provide some audit support or other natures that I need to have to share with others via traditional reporting, and all of this within a configuration management environment. Those are the things that we're looking for. That's what our users are need to be successful. And we kind of collapse this all into one term, which is the digital thread. How do I link between all these different repositories? How do I link between these artifacts? That's the digital thread. That's really what makes our digital twin operational. And that's our goal here. So how do we do that within Jira? Let's get pragmatic about this along the way. What we want to do is take a look at how this actually manifests itself. So our product, OSLC Connect for Jira, is an extension to your Jira platform. So the types of things that we want you to look at here is, it's a simple plugin. It's on the marketplace for Atlassian, which is important both from accessibility, if it's easy for you to install within your Jira environment, but also when you look at being on the marketplace for Jira Data Center in particular, requires us to be able to go through architecture reviews, performance assessments. It's really making sure that it's operational within your environment, doesn't impact any of the performance of all your other Jira plugins that you have. It's a sign of quality and performance that we're pretty proud of within our team, to be able to make sure that we can add this critical functionality to the Jira interface. And so along the way, what we do is we actually provide these OSLC services into Jira. So you'll see the server collaboration, how do we do linking between artifacts, all the configuration management support, and what's called a tracked resource set, which is all the reporting support underneath this to be able to make sure that we can report on these artifacts. That's really what's bundled within our product and our solution. That's probably making it more simple than it actually is, but we want to expose a very simple interface to our users. Along the way, we're preserving that Jira experience. Jira is known for being simple to use, a clear UI. We have a clear workflow. We're looking at that work and that feel for how people interact with their systems. And really the idea here is that we provide your organization to amplify the tools that you already have. So most of our teams already have Jira someplace within their organization. They have a requirements management tool within their organization. So we want people to be able to have access to that and be able to see that. When we look at how this integrates with other tools, we want to be able to make sure we preserve that same experience. So as you look and we do this demonstration, you'll see the Jira experience native to the Jira environment, the look and feel. When we see any of the menus for our tool, you're not going to see it look any different than any of the other Jira products, which is fantastic. It's what's great about their API and their solution, but it's also a core goal of ours as we look at our other tools as well. So when we look in the IBM tools, whether it's DOORS Classic or whether it's the IBM ELM suite, you'll get that same concept. So the look and feel of your native tool, having access to the tools and capabilities of Jira from that. So whether you're in DOORS Classic and being able to see a rich preview into Jira, or whether or not you're creating a new defect from within ETM, you're going to have access to these types of information and be able to do all the reporting that you natively want to do with the IBM tools natively within the Jira environment as well. Now, in addition to this, not only the nice thing about OSLC is it's not just a standard for IBM, it's a standard for other platforms as well. We see teams like the Siemens team with their Polarion tool adding more and more capability. This is brilliant for us. That means one tool, one solution for OSLC for Jira connects us to a wealth of other different tools and foundations. So you'll see this a little bit. We'll give you a quick glimpse of Polarion as well as we go through here. The ability to be able to create artifacts within Jira from within Polarion, be able to navigate from Jira back into Polarion, back and forth. The same OSLC look and feel with a new type of solution. So should be a good feel. What we're going to do in this demo, I'm not going to show all the features that we have in our product because that would probably take more time than you have allocated this morning. But we do want to give you a little bit of a feel of how these things operate, how they interact, some pragmatic use cases. We'll talk a bit about OSLC integrations, why they're important, why they're valuable, what things that you can look for in there. And then hopefully you'll see some of the attention to detail of how we've used the native tools. How do we allow you to be able to customize your workflow and build from there? And we're going to get into the IBM environment and kind of walk you through some of the capabilities of what we can see and what we can do. So we're going to start in ETM, what used to be called the Quality Manager. The goal of this tool is to be able to make sure that we're testing the right artifacts. So we can look at a simple test case in here. We're going to do like some basic integrations here and talk about that. The nice thing about a tool like ETM is we're going to have this connectivity between our requirements. So on this test case, we're going to say which requirements we're actually covering. We're also going to be able to execute a test script. We're also going to be able to then file a defect if we have any issues along the way. That's really the goal and objective as we go through this, is to be able to see where we're at and what we're doing. The other thing I want you to know, and you'll see this in the upper right-hand corner here, is we have configuration management turned on as well. So we're working with our 1.0 stream of test cases, requirements, and across our whole engineering assets here. This is important as we look at the different versions of requirements we might have going forward, but it allows our test cases to point to the right version of requirements, and you'll see later on that our defects will point to the right version of those requirements as well. So let's go ahead and run this simple test case here. The goal here is not necessarily to focus on the questions or the steps of this test case. I actually made this just trivially easy here. Is we just know that when you're using ETM, you're actually going through and you're checking a set of conditions. You're executing some tests, whether it's an automated test or oftentimes you're using a manual script like this. You're going to walk through and be able to have some issues, be able to identify steps that are being executed, and you might find out that, hey, we have a defect at step 2. You want to create a defect. Now, traditionally, what you'd want to do is be able to create this in your defect management tool. What's nice about OSLC, it allows us to be able to bridge that gap in between different types of tools. And so in this case, my defect management tool could be Rational Team Concert, or in this case, when I go to create a new defect, what you'll see is actually a Jira form. And so this Jira form is actually using this OSLC standard, allows me to be able to automatically create a defect. It's going to populate information and it knew that I need to create a bug because I was creating a defect. It gave me some details about my test steps that I were on, and I can go ahead and create that item immediately from within my ETM tool. So I'm not navigating over Jira, I'm creating that artifact, and lo and behold, I also can be able to see that artifact, have a rich preview, see that information from Jira natively within my ETM environment. So this gives you that tight integration. So for those of you that are running your test cases in IBM, your software team that might be reviewing these defects is in Jira, this is a fantastic way for us to be able to share that information, be able to have tracking and have details on it. Now, if I look and show the result, the nice thing here is that I have captured all the results in terms of my test case, what actually I ran, what the record is, so the results of that, as well as if I look at my defects, you're going to see that I have my Jira defect here. Now, what we talked about before is one of the basic user values here is navigation. So the nice thing about having OSLC here is not only do I have those rich previews, but just by clicking on that artifact, I'm going to navigate over to Jira. So it's not like I've actually been between different tools. It's actually that I can have this smooth navigation as I go from my IBM tool chain over to Jira and back again. I have access to that. And the same thing goes from within Jira now. You're going to see that I have access to these artifacts. Now, I haven't looked at any ETM artifacts within Jira in this session yet, so it's going to ask me to log in. This is part of the authentication process to be able to make sure I'm not giving any information that somebody shouldn't have. I can trigger a login process that's going to happen. It's going to happen once per session, but once I do that, you'll see that I have access to that test case. You'll even see hints of that it had failed previously. So I have results and access to that information, and I can navigate back over to ETM at any point to be able to see the details of that. The other thing you'll note is that now not only do I have a link back to ETM, but I also have a link back to that requirement, so that was automatic from when I created this defect from within ETM. I also made sure that I put a link on there to be able to say, this is the requirement that that test case was failing. So somebody who's in Jira is going to be able to see this information, be able to have knowledge of what's actually going on. So it's a nice way to be able to have that. And in fact, just like what we did before, if somebody wanted to be able to navigate over into my DOORS Next environment, I can just by clicking that button. I'm going to navigate over to that artifact within DOORS Next, and lo and behold, you're going to have access to that information. Now, the nice thing here is that you'll see that all the power that we've had before about having visibility to artifacts across the IBM lifecycle is also here with Jira. So you can see that we have different artifacts and different previews that I can be able to see within the Jira items as well, and be able to navigate and be able to see those artifacts. So it's the seamless flow that I can do back and forth between these, as well as I navigate, you'll see that I retain the same version, this same configuration. So my tools are working together to be able to make sure I'm looking at the right artifacts at the right times. Now, the other thing to pay attention to here is I can just as easily create artifacts from within the environment within Jira or within DOORS Next. So if I want to, I can go ahead and create a new link. So if I want to create, add a link to this artifact, I can go ahead and say, hey, maybe I want to create a story. You'll see that what's nice about OSLC, we have different picker views. So in the case that if I'm creating a link to another DOORS artifact, I'm going to see a DOORS interface. If I want to create, say, an implemented by, so this is a change artifact, you'll see a different picker that's going to be associated with the source tool. So this is what we're providing into the enterprise. that you can have this picker to be able to go pick an existing Jira artifact, or I can go about and say I want to create a new artifact, and you'll see some differences here. Now in this case, I actually have defaulted to create a story because I'm going to create a story from an implementation request. So I can go ahead and create some details, some description maybe, and be able to create some content about that and be able to create that artifact live as we're looking here. And we're going to be able to see that artifact, be able to navigate that artifact. Here it's live within this environment. And so this is a nice way to be able to see that I can interact back and forth. I can go back into my Jira environment and be able to see this artifact, see this link. Now, one of the other things that I want to have you look at here, and we mentioned it a couple of times, is that this configuration management concept. And so configuration management allows me to know which version of an artifact that I'm working with. But we know as we're working with our change request or things like that, we might actually change which version we're working with. So you'll see along the way that if I change my version, so my version that I'm targeting for this implementation request, you can actually see this version of this requirement change. You'll see right now that I'm working with 802.11g. If for some reason I decided that I wanted to be able to maybe work in a later release, say this feature got pushed out later to my 1.1 release, you're going to go ahead and see what happens with OSLC from the standpoint of configuration management. You'll see this requirement description changed. The requirement itself didn't change, but the version of the requirement did. And so this allows my Jira users to always have the right version of that artifact, access to that right version of that artifact. If I actually went and said, I want to open this link in a new tab, you'll see that I'm going to actually be working in the 1.1 version of that release and not the 1.0. All that activity that goes around in the background is managed by our implementation within Jira. As well as we know, it's a little bit difficult sometimes to get used to this, to be able to know how this works and how this maps. So we actually provide some features in here to be able to understand, oh wow, if I want to know what version of the configuration management I'm working with, I can hover and it will tell me which version of the GC. If I want to know more, I can hit that question mark, and then we're going to describe to you why we said that that's the version you should be working with based on your link type, based on which versions you have, what your mapping is to your GC. It's providing all those details for you to be able to have access to that information. And so we're trying to be able to make that visible to you, have access to that. The other thing that I want to point out here is not only do we allow you to be able to create links from, say, the IBM tools that you've seen, you'll also be able to create those links back into those other tools. So in this case, you'll see this collaboration link option here. It allows me to be able to say, maybe I want to create, in this case, another implementation request. And I can go ahead and be able to see that, be able to navigate to an existing artifact. And you're going to see the DOORS Next dialog pop up here so that I can have access to those types of artifacts that I might want to link to, and simply can create a link by selecting a couple of these objects, hitting OK. I'm going to link to those artifacts for you. So whether I'm working natively in Jira or if I'm working natively in the DOORS Next environment, I can see both of those directions just as seamlessly and be able to create those links. Now, the other thing that's important as we look through here is not just that I can create those links, and creating links is valuable to give this navigation, this traceability, but we also want to be able to report on those links. And so, for example, within this environment, within the IBM environment, I have a tool called Report Builder. It allows me to be able to create some simple reports, but the power here is, and you'll see I'm going to run a report, and it's going to work in this AMR 1.0 context that I was working with before. What's going to be nice about this is it's actually going to natively go through and be able to pull information, so requirements that take place within my DOORS Next environment, and be able to have access to that. It's going to have quality management results. It's also going to have my Jira issues as well. So it's going to have all those things together so that I can have access to those interface and those details at any time that I want to be able to access that information. It's immediately up to date. I can access those artifacts whenever I want. and allows me to be able to fulfill my need for reporting. And the thing that I want you to keep in mind as we look at this is actually what's happening behind the scenes in that tracked resource set that I was talking about. Because what happens here, I want to look at the core behind this, is that we actually are supporting trace relationships and Jira issues as native into this report builder tool. So if you want to create relationships between requirements, your Jira issues, and your QM results, you have access natively to those Jira issues, as well as when we go ahead and format those results. If I want to add another attribute here, you'll see that on my Jira artifact, I have attributes that I can add to that report and be able to bring in there. And we allow you to be able to customize which of those attributes that you're using in those reports and which ones you're publishing from Jira that have access in here. So it has this full traceability to be able to leverage that. And so ideally, that gives you a good feel of what we're trying to accomplish, what we're doing, how deeply this is embedded within the environment. Now, a couple things that I did want to bring up before we jump into some doors elements as well. We do, put behind the scenes, allow a lot of different types of configurations. So you'll see a little bit from the admin side of this as well. When you saw me creating a link from the Jira side, you see lots of different relationships that I can create. We do support you to be able to customize that, meaning that you can set what your default link relationship is. You can customize which of these OSLC link relationships you might want to provide on a certain artifact. You have flexibility to be able to do that. The other thing that we talked about was that, hey, when I created an artifact from within ETM, I created a bug. When I created an artifact from within DOORS Next, I created a story. The reason why that happened was this configuration that we allow here, which is to say that I can say for a defect, this is the artifact type I want. For an implementation request, this is the artifact type that I want. So no matter what your scheme is within Jira, you're going to be able to customize that and have the experience that your users really want to be able to have and have access to. And then the last thing to put out there, for those of you that are getting into the advanced features that we have within DOORS Next, one of the ones that we really encourage for our teams that are doing critical systems, they have to have reviews. What DOORS Next allows much more control of these different versions, these streams of activities, in terms of saying, hey, for each edit that we have, we need to have a change set. And even better, we want to be able to make sure that we have an approved change request. That change request can be a change request from Jira, as well as within our configuration, we allow you to be able to identify what an approval means to you, which might be a certain state of a Jira item, it might be certain attributes on the Jira item. You have capability to be able to define what that is so that you can make sure that your users are reviewing their changes that they're doing within the DOORS Next environment prior to them being able to deliver that and share those with others. So if you want more information on that, just let us know. We're happy to be able to dive deeper into that. But we're trying to touch on a few different tools today and be able to give you a preview of that. So with that, let me transition from the IBM ELM platform into the IBM DOORS Classic platform, because I think we saw in the poll many of your users are using this type of system.
Robert, before you move on,
yes.
there's a question coming, which I think is probably worthwhile handling it now. The question from Gianluca is this all based on OSLC or is a connector needed?
So yeah, that's a good question, because it's both. So from a OSLC perspective, all the integration that you've seen is OSLC based interaction between the IBM tools and Jira. That's all OSLC based interaction. What our connector does, and it only sits on top of Jira, and extends the Jira API to be able to provide these OSLC services, meaning it's part of OSLC is identifying how do we connect between different repositories. And so you'll see that this is one OSLC Connect for Jira that's connected to two different variants of ELM. It's connected to DOORS Classic. It's connected to Windchill. It's connected to to Polarion. It's an OSLC-based interface that allows you to be able to connect to all these different tools. So it is a connector that sits on top of Jira, but it provides this OSLC solution that allows these other tools to connect to it. So there's nothing to install in Polarion. There's nothing to install on the IBM side. It's simply those products are providing those OSLC services, and we're adding those services to Jira. Good question. Thanks, Wolfgang, for helping me clarify that. That helps a bunch. So kind of building off of this, we'll show you a little bit of DOORS Classic here. And the nice thing about what we're talking about here is OSLC being a standard is there's no changes that we make to DOORS Classic. Within DOORS Classic, it has native OSLC support. So you're going to see these outbound links here. These outbound links are going to be OSLC links. So I can see on a particular requirement, I can go ahead and right click on this. I can see the Jira tickets, be able to see elements and artifacts. I can see rich previews back into Jira. So instead of having some of our older solutions for copying information back and forth between Jira and DOORS, this is actually a live view into the artifacts within Jira. So if I'm on a requirement and want to understand what is the status of this, is this complete, has this been implemented, I can natively be able to go and see that. What you're going to see with OSLC is that it has the framework of doing things, but the implementation is going to be a little bit different in terms of if I want to create a new implemented link from DOORS Classic into Jira, you're going to see everything's going to be framed in a typical DOORS Classic interface, but I can go ahead and select either I want to select an artifact. You're going to see interfaces that are going to be typical for us. I can go ahead and see, like, if I want to look for a requirements change request, I can look for an epic, or I can look for a story and be able to see a pick list of the artifacts that I might want to create a relationship to, as well as I can go ahead and create an artifact. So I'm going to see that same interface that we saw before. So this is a sample story from DOORS Classic. So I have that same interface to be able to make sure that I go ahead and can create an artifact. These are all going to be your own Jira forms for being able to create, whether it's a story or an issue or whatever type of artifact you're creating. And you can go ahead and hit create, and that will create both the artifact as well as create the link as well. And so we can go ahead and save this within DOORS Classic, and then we could go ahead and see those artifacts over in Jira. The nice thing is we're really not changing the context in which a typical DOORS user would operate. We're still having them operate within the traditional DOORS client, but if I navigated over into my project over here within Jira, we can go ahead and refresh this. We should be able to see that artifact that I just created. There's the artifact that I just created. And I'm going to have access within Jira back into that DOORS interface and that DOORS client. So I'm going to get the rich preview. So one of the biggest challenges we've often had with DOORS Classic users in Jira is we were copying information back and forth. And probably most critically, copying DOORS requirements back into Jira. Now, here's a nice thing for us to be able to do is we can go ahead and now give these Jira users access to those requirements and be able to have them see those artifacts natively within their Jira environment. They don't have to install a DOORS client. They don't have to worry about are these the right versions of the requirements, because these are all being pulled dynamically from DOORS, and even better yet, they're actually operating under your user ID. So only people that should see that are seeing that. So you don't have issues about what's my authentication control, what am I doing about security. I can have access to that information right away. And so we have the same flow that I can do back and forth. I can navigate from DOORS Classic into Jira, vice versa. One of the things though we've noticed with our DOORS Classic users is they tend to want to be able to operate within their DOORS Classic environment. And it makes a lot of sense. They want to be able to use their normal client. They have thousands, if not tens of thousands of requirements in a module. And so what we found, I showed you a little bit of interface before of creating links from within Jira into DOORS Next. The same type of flow happens here as well within within the common environment here for DOORS Classic. So I can go ahead and pick my module here. So this environment, I can go ahead and link to an existing requirement. What's going to happen is that I'm going to get the dialogues behind the scenes, and the dialogues for DOORS are going to basically do what I already have open in my other window, which is go ahead and identify which module I want to select to, and then which requirement I want to be able to navigate to. It's a bit of a slower interface, a slower flow when we know that somebody already has an artifact visible within the other window. So we can go through this process, take some time. This is actually a relatively small module. So it's actually relatively quick compared to some of our modules that might have 10,000 requirements or so. So somebody can come in here, select a requirement, maybe select a couple of requirements here, and be able to finish that. It's going to create those links for us. And so we can engage in that and be able to use that interface to be able to do that. What we found though is that our DOORS users tend to be a little bit different. They want to do some things differently than they might have had before, which is why we provided this drop requirement type interface. What this allows us to be able to do is use the advantages of our DOORS client that we already know is open, along with our Jira client side by side. So instead of having to go and navigate, if I already know where my requirement is, I can just drag and drop that requirement into this environment over here and be able to just natively be able to bring these artifacts in. It gives me a lot more capability to be able to bring those artifacts within that environment and be able to create links easy and natively. And even in fact, because we know that people might want to create links to a bunch of different artifacts, we can go ahead and do a multi-select. We provided some simple DXL here. You can use whatever DXL you want. Allows me to copy and paste the DOORS references into this drop window. So in case I need to be able to create links to lots of different objects at once, I can use my DOORS client to my advantage to be able to do that. Or I could have a filtered view within my DOORS client and be able to grab the whole set of artifacts over there and bring those in and link those into Jira. So it gives me a lot of flexibility to be able to work with those and be able to integrate with those. And so that should give you a little bit of flavor of what we're doing with DOORS Classic. So it's all OSLC, but it's geared towards our DOORS Classic users. So understand they have some constraints that they're operating with their existing Classic client, how they can get the most value out of there, and how they can work with DOORS together. I know this question will probably be out there about some of the dialoguing when we created those links. You do need to have DOORS Web Access operational within your environment to use this interface, because that is the way in which IBM implements their OSLC interfaces. And the other question that we typically have is, what version of DOORS do you have? And starting with 9.6.1.11 absolutely is the versions that we start being able to support the OSLC interfaces with Jira. If you want to use more of the configuration management elements as well, we do support those, but that's going to be DOORS Classic 9.7.2. So if you have any questions on that, reach out to our team. We do evaluations, we do demos with teams to answer questions specifically, so we're happy to work with you on that. One other item that we're going to get to before we open it up to questions, because I know there's a couple people that were using Polarion as well, and we can give you a little bit of a view into that very briefly as well. When we're looking with Polarion, same type of look and feel, same type of engagement that we have. As you'll notice, we're a little bit different in terms of how we might interact with these artifacts because the tools are a little bit different. So in this case, we wanted to do some linking from within this environment in Polarion. On these artifacts, I can go ahead and say I want to create, in this case, an implementation link. I'm going to be able to use this external OSLC link. You'll see this login that's encouraging me to be able to take advantage of that. I can go ahead and use an existing item like we talked before, or we can go ahead and create a new artifact. So in this case, maybe I want to create a new element here. I'm going to get that same dialogue as we saw before. So this is my sample task, and you saw how I was able to map that to a specific task. And I can go ahead and create that item and it's going to create my link within the Polarion environment. You're going to see that I can go ahead and save that interface, and then I'm going to have that linking capability into, and that preview capability into the environment already within Jira. And even if I actually wanted to navigate over to that artifact, I could. And what you're going to see is I'm going to have a link back into my Polarion environment and have that rich preview back into my Polarion environment. And so what you see here is that our interface here is making us compatible to all these different OSLC solutions, and allows us to be able to have visibility, have integration with that. And you'll see how the different tools operate a little bit differently in terms of how they provide those windows. But the nice thing is it stays consistent with the tool that you're using. So in this case, when I'm looking at my Polarion requirement, it looks like a Polarion requirement. If I look at my DOORS Next requirement, it looks like a DOORS Next requirement. So it's a good way to be able to interact within these systems and be able to work back and forth. A couple things specific on the Polarion side. We are excited with the more features that they're putting with OSLC. Each release seems to have a bit more in terms of some usability capabilities on that, as well as it's a platform that allows you extreme amount of configuration. And so you can be able to map your different link types you already have to OSLC link types. Lots of flexibility in doing that integration, and we'll work with your team to be able to make sure you're getting the most out of that. Couple last thoughts before we exit out of here and return back to some questions, which I'm looking forward to. The other item that we didn't show here, which was actually, I think I might even have a window open for it. We'll give you a glance. We didn't show integration with Windchill, so we have a Windchill support as well. You'll see Windchill here actually has integrations where we can actually link to Jira artifacts within Windchill. So that's a platform that we're seeing more and more people wanting to connect to. It's the beauty of OSLC. It's not just a one-to-one connection, it's a one-to-many connection. So we can use lots of different tools together. The other thing to note would be what you saw today was some of our 2.6 release, which is coming out next week. So we're in the final stages of doing the final testing of that with the different versions. The important things to keep in mind for that, some of those GC features that you saw were, hey, which configuration am I using? Those hints, those are all part of that 2.6 release, as well as in 2.6 is support for IBM ELM 7.0.2. So there are some changes that they made there about how they're handling GCs, and we went ahead and made sure that we had compatibility as well as some special enhancements to that to give you the experience in Jira that you want while still utilizing global configurations within the IBM. So lots of good stuff to look forward to. Expect a blog post coming out next week to give you some more details on that, as well as those of you who are existing customers, you'll be able to just go to our download portal, be able to access that, update your environment to the 2.6 version. So we're pretty excited about that. So with that, let me kind of jump back to a couple slides. Hopefully you saw a sense of what detail, what capability we're providing in our product. Give it a little bit of in-action dynamic demos that we can do. But really what we want you to keep in mind is we're getting traceability across the life cycle. So what was unique about that demonstration there is that we used IBM tools. We used, I think, 4 different IBM tools. We used a Siemens tool. We used Windchill tool. We used Jira. We used these all together. This is the diversity that we expect in our enterprise. And we're not copying information. We're just linking that data and have access to that, which is really hitting on the second point is we want to connect your people and data because you're going to have people that are dominant working in their Jira environment. You're going to have people dominant within their requirements management tool. We want to connect them together. We want to give them visibility of their artifacts so they can share what they're working on, and so people can be more efficient. That's really the goal here, as well as we want engineering tools of choice. We know engineers are more productive with tools that they're familiar with. Let's not force them to be able to change all their tools and be able to use something completely different. Let's go ahead and be able to make sure that they have ones that they're most productive